All right. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of That's So Funny. I want to welcome special guest today, comedian, model, actress, writer, producer, Hannah Roeschlein. How you doing, Hannah?
Cannot complain whatsoever.
No, I'm sure I could find reasons to complain, but that's just life. No, appreciate your time today. Thank you for coming on.
No sweat. Thanks for being so diligent and wanting to get me on here throughout my flakiness and scheduling slippery. Uh,
No,
yeah,
no worries.
put it that way.
No worries. I appreciate your time. I really do.
Yeah, no sweat.
Mhm. So yeah, I listened to your comedy album, Asian American Psycho. You'll find that on. I know I heard it on Spotify, but goes through 800 Pound Gorilla Media. Um, and from just that alone, I hear you grew up like white and religious because you're kind of like half and half. What inspired you to go into comedy? Like what were your plans before that, if any? Uh, comedy.
Um, I comedy was something that, along with a few other types of creative pursuits, that I had considered and been interested in getting involved in since I was young. I just took a very long way around to that. I think anyone who's ever known me at this stage of my life, from probably, the elementary school age to now at 40, would say that my humor leads. So, like, I'm not doing a job that's difficult for me. Comedy is hard in all the other ways aside from being funny for me. But I am not a person who has to like dig into a wellspring um for what would make people laugh. I just like I moved in that direction at all times. I am the one kind of creating levity at friends' funerals. I have, I guess, what you would call an inability to be completely serious, even when things have a more severe nature. And so I think I just like took the long way around on it. I definitely was the kind of humorist that the entire time, even my own thoughts on comedy were kind of second to just the humans that I would be interacting with at serving jobs or school or friend groups, etc., who would be like, "Hey, have you considered stand up?" And eventually it just got to the point in my mid 30s where I got out of a shitty relationship and I said to myself, "Hey, you have thought you were so funny your whole life, and this has been something that interested you. Why don't you go put your money where your mouth is?" And I have not been off that stage since. So that was coming up on my like 8th year eventually. Like I'm approaching year 8, I believe, maybe 7. So yeah, that's the kind of story of that long time laugher, late blooming comic, but obviously not in a job that I think anyone feels is not something that I should be doing. It's pretty natural to my wood grain. But before that, I was just doing a lot of other things, front desk, retail, serving for 20 years in fine dining basically until I really kind of pulled the trigger on beginning to do comedy. And then it took me about 3 or 4 years into doing it to be able to shift into doing it full time.
Okay. No, that's so and that's still quite a bit of years experience under your belt. 8 years is nothing, I'm sure you're still learning what with the ever changing landscape of how wacky things can be. Um and as far as being in like the professional industry of comedy, was that kind of hard to break into, or was there anything that might have like unmotivated you or made it hard, or that to break out from being just a funny person with your friends to taking it very like professionally and serious?
Well, it's not a there's no build a bear that's standard for anyone's creative journey, and comedy is no different from that. So I don't know what to say to that exactly, except that I kept coming in to the office. I didn't act like an asshole when I was there. I I there's like I said, I comedy is one of those situations anymore where everybody has a lot of thoughts on everything from crowd work versus no crowd work, being on stage all the time to having an internet presence. And I'm simply just like not one of those humans. I don't run a lot of analysis on my creativity at all. In fact, the closer anything gets towards like numbers or rules or this is the routine or this is whatever, I tend to push back off of that kind of a feeling. um so my path has just been a little more kind of unconventional as far as like what could keep you from comedy. Everything. I mean, every man at the office makes me not want to come in, even the ones that are well behaved. Everyone on the internet makes me not want to post, even the ones who are well behaved. Everything that basically is in circulation as far as the discourse of this job makes me not want to participate. But when I get all that stuff quiet and I don't listen to anyone at work and I turn off the computer and I just do the things that I want to do within it, it all is quite quiet. And in that quietness, I understand that I have a place here and that, even if I were to be canceled, I'd still have a place here. So there's really nothing that can be done as far as that's concerned. So, like, how you become a professional at this job is completely, subject to what your abilities are, how people perceive you and enjoy your stage presence and your off stage presence. There's 1,000 factors that go into every booking that are so much bigger than just being funny or, whatever that is. And so I think it's just like, there's just a lot of moving parts. But I think the biggest thing for all of this is simply just like a courageousness or a tenacity to actually get up on stage and see if that first 5 minutes at an open mic suits you. And then beyond that, it's all just your personalization, finesse, and ability to, have some discipline, work through your creativity as a business and not only just a hobby. And then you know, see where that kind of leads. But the thing is, it's a pretty bottomless office to be in with a million spaces to kind of wiggle yourself into. I think everybody just thinks there needs to be, oh, I have to get a special on Netflix and I have to have this and I have to have that. And it's like, yeah, well, some of that stuff that I thought that I was going to be a major marker for me in comedy, like JFL, is a festival that doesn't even exist now or went bankrupt last. So it's like to even say that any certain things within the entire infrastructure matter more than others. Absolutely not. I think, you just need to kind of go in there and you get in where you fit in. And, it's not always fair or sense making, but none of it is. So if you have that kind of a feeling where you need everything to have sweat equity, then maybe this is not the fucking office for you.
No, yeah, of course.
Every
You
thing will tear you down in comedy. So if you're a person who is quite fragile, I would say don't.
No, of course, humor's
Because
subjective, so
yeah, that's just what it is. Like, you really better be able to stand and deliver night after night with your menu, and otherwise, you're just going to be a person who's always trying to build your concept or your brand based around everything that you think everybody wants, and no one knows what they want. So I would, like I said, go ahead and like figure out who you are as you come in. All of the things around you will take shape. My jokes have taken many forms over the past 7 to 8 years. Um, as far as like what those look like, but I still came in with a pretty a good authentic kind of voice to myself, and that will never not serve you in this industry. In fact, the later you come in and have actually like figured yourself out a bit, the better you'll be, instead of you being on stage for the first 5 to 10 years and just like burning through immaturity and bullshit. It would be better to start the way that I did, when you actually have something to say, as opposed to just coming out trying to make crowd work clips and playing around on an algorithm that's neither friendly nor gives a fuck about you. So there's just like, there's a million ways, like you said, to get in it. And there's people that just do online stuff that have skipped ahead in line as far as you could like see, you know, but at the end of it, if you're going to continue to be in this on a day-to-day basis in a sustainable way, like it's just important that you not put together a house of cards. So whatever that looks like for you, I just encourage everyone to just kind of build with a little bit more framing, as opposed to just being like, I want to get into comedy and here's, XYZ. It's like, yeah, there's plenty of us out here in it. It's like there's so many people in it. I could never even begin to know everybody at any time, and that's even the people that are like quite talented. So I think that's another thing to remember too. You don't have to be a household name in most of these jobs to have a completely sustainable career. Like I don't even have 10,000 followers on Instagram. I make $0 online as far as my comedy is concerned right now, and I have a fully functional, you know, thing in front of me, including being signed to a reputable label, having started to act, doing other things, being passed at two clubs in the United States of America. So it's like, yeah, you don't have to listen to me about any of it, but just understand there's a lot more to it than meets the eye as well. And if you want clout, I guess you could just go move to Austin and stand in one of the lines for Kill Tony. And if you want to, build in a different way, you could try out any of the other scenes as well. So shout outs to Austin. It's a fun place to do comedy. I just, if I wanted to join a frat, I'd go back to IU. Um, some grown up scenes, no matter how they portray them.
No, I completely agree with you. And now, as far as like craving or carving yourself into this industry, it being for you, you know, an Asian woman with a deep voice battling sobriety, is that like persona sort of like help you or hinder you? How do you feel about that as far as into like comedy? Your it's because it's not a character, it's yourself. But do you think those are like holding you back, or they help shape your comedy?
I think anything that's in your wood grain would be a real, um, it would be really unfortunate if it was not. Um, I mean, let's just put it this way: everything that makes me who I am is who I am. How that's perceived by anyone isn't really anything I care about. So I would say the answer to that is 50-50. Half of the people love that I am a symbol of diversity and a person of color and a female that has, as booming a voice as any of the males today, and in every way, shape, or form that's supported by someone. There's another human that does not like that, whether it has to do with misogyny, race, just various other, drugs and interpretations of personal comedy styles. But it's like what meant to say about that wood grain is like, I'm just not in a position anymore at 40 years old, like I was at 20, to curb my enthusiasm based on how I want other people to perceive me or how they feel. I simply present whatever it is that I am and how I feel on a day-to-day basis, and whomever resonates with my coffee table, awesome. But otherwise, I'm not going to change the on it. I'm not going to put a new stain on it. I'm not going to try to even put any like vases or decorations on whatever it is that I am to more, make people comfortable in whatever it is that it is. It's like I just kind of put myself up there like it's a showroom, and it's like, hey, if that's your style, rad, bring it home. And if it's not, go home, just like I will later. Don't care. So I haven't really put as much thought into all the things that held me down, because if I did, I started. I
No,
simply see them as like opening that other people cannot open. So for some people, my being a female, my being Asian, my being from a small town, my being, not from any kind of like means or money, may not want, may not make me their ideal candidate. But it's simply like even me sharing things like for Free Palestine online, where people say, Hannah, that's going to keep you from people wanting to work with you in the future. And I'm like, absolutely. And I don't want to work with those people in the future. And I would really, really not rather have them in my audience as well. So from the future collaborators, to anyone who just wants to sit and support me, I am not, tidying up for my guests. You can simply just come in, see the raw, experience the real, feel how you feel, and then go with God. Nothing personal on my end. I just don't care.
Yeah, you're a person with your own opinions, and people should be able to separate that from the art if they want to, and if they don't, then don't. It really is simple.
Yeah.
um, see. Oh, how I hope you're still doing well on your sobriety, unless you don't care to speak about it or whatever. Was getting sober your own decision, or did someone else kind of ask you to make that choice, or kind of give you that inspiration to go, or I don't know, is that something you want to talk about?
We can absolutely talk about it. I'm about 5.5 years sober from booze after drinking hardcore for 15 years. But mixed bag. I mean, obviously when you're drinking at that level, 10 plus drinks a day, everyone in your life is not feeling good about it. So it's not like I didn't have external pressures, but the internal pressure was the greatest. And honestly, as an alcoholic, you cannot stop that alcoholism or even begin to put kind of like this stoppage time on it unless you want to quit. So, like, it will not matter who leads you to the water or to rehab. If you do not want to stop inside and get that kind of figured out and straightened out, it will not last. You'll just be miserably in a sobriety for your mom or your husband or your kids or whatever. I'm not saying that's not worth it. I'm just simply saying it will never feel as good as it can feel, and it can feel substantially better. But with that said, it was more just me. I was well aware that I was not only going to probably die in the next like several years if I had not gotten sober from booze physically, but also just watching the death of my dreams daily since I was a child. I just basically started comedy. My first year and a half of comedy was my last year and a half of 15 years of drinking. So they kind of were very like climatic, at the time it started, but I was basically tucked away in Indiana for that year and a half just doing open mics for 5 minutes, blacked out, so it wasn't like it was like profoundly devastating to my career. If anything, it was just kind of like, whoa. um when I stopped, like, we knew she was funny. Oh, we didn't really quite realize how much booze was in there. But that's the answer to that question. It was just, I'd been in a lot of different scenarios of trouble, obstacle, hardship due to my drinking. I knew I had a drinking problem from probably the very first year and kept it up anyway for a decade and a half. So, when you get to that place and you decide to lay everything down, I mean, I would give it mostly to God before I would say this had anything to do with my family or anything outside of me. This was more just like an internal desire to see myself, flourish at the highest level and really empty out the, gas in my tank as opposed to being emptied out by just some useless beverages.
No, yeah, and that's always a never-ending battle. I'm sure is what they say. Like, you're never really uh like recovered. You're always sort of keeping yourself away from drinking or any sort of other vices that might be. So no, no, that's amazing to hear. Uh and I know on your special Asian American Psycho, you joke a little about suicide, or I don't know if there are these real issues you deal with, or that you have any advice for people who like want to like keep fighting the good fight, or might bring them down.
Yeah, hang in there. Just don't hang in there. Pretty simple. Keep the light on. There's, like I said, there's like 15 years of my life minimum that I barely remember, and did not feel good that entire time. And now, 5 years with that in my rear view, it seems like a million miles away. So it's just like, I think the only thing that can keep you from being completely different than you are is not being here. So as long as you can continue to sort of even, what feels like you pulling yourself along the ground like a little slug for, XYZ amount of time. Because that's the craziest part about this whole thing. It's not linear, and there aren't these just like timetables to everyone's journey and sobriety and garden blooming in the ways that they do. So if you keep looking at everybody else's shit at all times, you will not look at your own. So I just encourage you for per always to just like turn the outside off, turn in, get quiet, and that sucks having to like sit with yourself and like actually tend to the more tender parts of your nature and soul soothe and some of the things that we do, and laying down a very hypercritical mind and grounding yourself more into your body. Meditating is a major part of what I would preach and do preach on and off stage. I'm a 4-year practitioner to the point where now I'm in the 60 to 90 minute range the majority of the days of the week. I was looking at this recently, but analytically, if you do want to look at the numbers of my comedy, I do more hours of meditation and things as far as like my healing within my physical body on a week basis than I do comedy, by probably double. But my comedy is the best that it's ever been. The quality of the stage time, the quality of the people that I'm working with, and the quality of my opportunities. So if you want to sit and listen to podcasts and do all the bullshit, and try to find some kind of like yourself and all of that, you can. Or if you want to actually sit with yourself, like I said, and find yourself and work on bringing that person up and out of the mire and muck a little bit, I think you would be really surprised at how every other thing in your life, anything that you do, will benefit. So, I remember thinking to myself a few years ago, I just thought, Hannah, if you just work on making yourself the best person that you can be, and I don't even say best like it's like, oh, I'm climbing towards something. Like, no, just a little bit of improvement, like in the way that I talk to myself, in the way that I show up for myself, in the way that I show up for others, in the way that I listen, in the way that I, carry myself on stage, and the things that I choose to give my free time to, and my mindsets. I just thought about that and I was like, well, just by the nature of improvement, if I improve, everything around me will also improve. It's just like if it's like tending to your own soil. And weed farms or whatever, they make amendments to the soil every year, which is what it's called, just to help their plants to more fully like absorb and grow. And if we tended to ourselves in that very same way, I think we would see all sorts of things pop up in seasons much faster and different than what we had planned. But not everybody wants to get their hands dirty, and not a lot of people, like I said, want to even like sit with themselves. They'd rather just like sit outside themselves and externally orient themselves to everything in their life, and that's okay. But you'll never feel like very much like peace in that sort of a position, because you're being pulled by everything aside from yourself. And so I will also just say, if you're battling thoughts of suicidal ideations, which I have done since I've been a child, I don't joke about things that are serious like that unless I've actually like, you know kind of sit and chew with that mortal coil on a day-to-day basis. And I still do, even though my life right now is, like we've said, the best it's ever been. And simply like going forward, I'm also sitting in the same reality that y'all are, and there aren't very many like veils anymore. And frankly, we are in a global hellscape, and so it doesn't feel good. So like no matter what I do within these confines, if you are tuned in and kind of plugged into the all of it, like this is a very tough time to be here. So it's like, I also encourage you to recognize that even within these slivers of happiness and peacefulness that you'll find for yourself, that overall the collective consciousness is in grief and in a lot of things just feeling very torn down and apart and not together, and various other drugs. So it is not an easy time to be here. It will continue to not be. I cannot see this getting anything but worse. And I say that with so much, don't leave yet. Um, but I do resonate with anyone who does have a real daily driver darkness and anxiety. And that's something that, I've always talked about on stage, and I always will, even in the brightest sets that I do to this day. I still am probably talking about things like that within it multiple times. And I don't intend to stop. In fact, it's when we don't have dialogue about suicide and other things like that that people go ahead and just keep those numbers up. And the numbers are the highest they've ever been for men, for Gen Z, etc. And that's something that I'm unwilling to like kind of go to the grave without making more of a concentrated effort to kind of help people chew through that a bit as someone who's, had that within me the whole time.
No, definitely self-reflection is something that, yeah, as scary as it sounds, like you said, it is necessary to sort of go with this world that we're living in. It's not, by all means, like you said, a positive world, but it is something that I feel like once you said we get past and realize ourselves, we can make the best of it, I guess, you know?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, on the quantum of this, we're particles and waves. So, like, every single thing happening around us, like, you don't trade war memes about Gaza to have the feelings of Gaza penetrate you. It's just not how this whole thing works. Like, we are the sum of all parts. So, I just, like I said, with that, that's an insanely scary, heavy thing to say. We're like, ugh, I'm affected by all things. But yes, you simply are. So, when you are in a position to be there and sponging off this hemorrhaging situation that we're all in together for as long as we're all in together, then I would just, yeah, encourage you to make the most of it as best as you can. Darkness doesn't actually exist, it's just the absence of light. So, like, you're going to have to turn yours on. And frankly, group consciousness does not raise except one person at a time. It's not like, oh, suddenly a community becomes enlightened. It's no, people within that community do and become so bright of lights that others around them are able to shift. And I still, and all of the, it doesn't sound like it on stage with me. Sometimes I can take a very like ominous tone towards things because I just, I'm real and I can see and feel, but I also understand that like I'm not God, I'm not the end all do all. And I believe and I have to believe that, our best days are yet to come. And there still are some of us that frankly aren't even making the kinds of sounds or splashes within the frame of the world as far as helping and alleviating these uglier sides of ourselves and feelings, so I just am kind of just remaining hopeful and buoyant right along with the reality that, things are quite incendiary, and knowing that I don't know everything and that, I can only frankly like focus on myself and putting out, like we said, whatever like the feelings I want from me towards the end of the world, whatever those little sparks look like, that's what I will be working on. And, at the end of it, I just encourage you to, see what your own like inner sparkler looks like and kind of, that little light of yours, just you got to let it kind of out there. And it's something I've been talking about on stage is, I turned 40 last year, and it's not by any means a death sentence. In fact, I'm a person that would be considered a quintessential late bloomer. um, so even if all of this, you feel kind of tardy to the party and you don't know how to get started, or you're just like afraid that you're so behind the eight ball as everything is, kind of going off the rails, don't don't none of this, like we've said, has felt extremely uplifting or hopeful. However, there is space for you to begin to do whatever it is that you want to do. Just like 7 years ago only did I start this job, and now it's my only income. 5 years ago I got sober from booze after 15 years hard drinking. 3 years ago did I move from Indiana to Chicago, and that was my very first move away from home, nearly 40 years old. And And then just last year did I get my first passport and went to Costa Rica for the first time this January. So it's like there's a whole world out here to be explored, and it doesn't even have to be done fast. But I would say, as we can all feel, like I said, this movement around us, that potentially maybe not sit still on it forever either, because we're not guaranteed that time either. So yeah, hurry or don't. But I have a tattoo on my arm that says Festina Lente, which is attributed to Caesar. And it was something I read in high school, and I kind of just resonated with me then, but it translates to hurry slowly. And, I just think that if you think about yourself and you're one of the people that believes you have an immortal soul, well, the human part of this body and potentially many other forms that we could take in the future is quite fast. So, yeah, you are forever, but this spin could be real fucking fast, depending on your choices. And that's kind of what all of this is, choices. It's just the law of sow and reap. What you do, you'll get out. So you don't have to look at it as anything more or less than that, or any kind of predestination or bullshit. You are quite autonomous, and you have a lot of ability within here to move in a lot of different ways and seek alternate currents. And nowadays, this is 2024, and I think the internet and some of these technological advances are what are leading to our decline as a nation and as a world right now. But at the same time, these tools allow us to have more communication, more collaboration, more communion with ideas that are more close to our center than others. It's like if when I was little, if I wanted to look towards things and be like, oh, what other mixed Asians are out there for me to have in representation? Well, like in the 80s and 90s, not many. It was like people like, oh, Connie Chung and the other journalist Asians, or I would root for all of the Olympian figure skaters, even if they weren't Filipino, and I would root for, just anyone. I was like rooting for Ms. Swan. She's not even Filipino or Asian. That was like a completely fabricated character on TV. In fact, the only person I knew growing up that I talk about it, I think, on my album, but the exact same spice blend as me in Hollywood, which was Filipino German, was Rob Schneider. And now he's not even really that great a person to look up to. But that's the point, is that in 40 years, I'm now a part of this like conversation and discourse on even what it looks like to be mixed as a creative in the Asian American canon, which sounds insane to me, but that's the reality of it. For people to call me Midwest Aquafina or Farm Moana, that's a greatly different tone and very humorous and sort of sweet from where I grew up as a kid, getting called things like gook and chink and spick and some of those more hard toned Asian slurs, to now being a part of this, like, like I said, I'm one of the ones where it's like, if you want to find mixed representation or something for yourself where you're like, hey, I'm queer and I'm this and I'm black and I'm this, well, great. There is a community for you now amongst all of that. You might have to sort through a lot of bullshit and noise, but that's part and parcel of what we're dealing with. But I am thankful in a lot of ways that those things exist, and that in ways for me, everything from being like, oh yeah, here's a mixed kid that's not drinking anymore after hard boozing, that's pursuing something later in life or whatever. If you can see all these little traits in someone and they are, similar to your own, like, recognize that they're also just like, let that be an indication to you that there are plenty of spaces for exactly whatever it is that's your shape, size, preference, belief, thought within this whole thing, or non-comedy.
No, absolutely. I grew up at the same time too, so I know how it is to have, as far as being a Mexican, that the characters that existed were essentially just token characters, or for gags. They weren't the main character. So I completely understand growing up in
I mean,
well, I'm
Rob
from eight.
made Mexicans on movies, and because it's like we're a tricky mix. So, I knew in the ways that I got called all these like slurs that were not pertaining to me, that my mix was very peculiar and like a little bit different. But that's the day and age we're in now too, where I was born in 83, but it's 2024. And now statistically the United States in the next 5 years or so will be more mixed than anything else. So
Mhm.
that's a you want to talk about a switch in positions where you think, oh, does this actually benefit Hannah Roeschlein on or off stage? I don't know, but kind of seems like if the trend is now that there will be more benefit, even if it doesn't like give me more stage time. I will at least have the ability to be in front of more people that look and sound like me, and I waited my whole fucking life for that. So that's something where I just like encourage everybody too, that it's like if you don't see the things around you just yet that feel exactly like you are, that one, you need to move and go away to somewhere else, like me taking off finally for Chicago and finally being able to have an address somewhere that I can buy pre-rolls and plan B, was important to me as an adult. But it still took me a very long time to do that. So don't demonize yourself on the speed of the transit with which you are moving through time and space. Because at some point, when you kind of just settle into yourself, you'll realize how quick the whole thing was. And at that point, it's almost over. So, you know, here we are, but just like, yeah, just like knowing that, like we were saying, I don't know what's on the horizon in the next 40 years. It feels like it's all AI and like nuclear war, but I at the same time recognize that if we're talking about these shifts that have occurred in just our lifetimes, then frankly we do not know what's on the horizon. And hopefully there are more things henceforth that are, gonna shock the shit out of me and everybody else and really make some like powerful towards this being a more, feel good place for all.
No,
All,
yeah.
all.
Hopefully, for sure. Speaking of your special, Asian American Psycho, what made you want to record it and put it out? Did you feel it was the time, or was it just an opportunity that kind of came up?
A little bit of both. I had the opportunity with the label approaching me to get the whole thing rolling. I have beyond the material to put it out at that time. Um, Frankly, I can only speak for myself. I recorded it very much so as I am on stage, which is like very like raw and kind of mixtape feeling. And it would, looking back on it now 2 years later, as the person who had to edit my own thoughts, like the shittiest season of True Detective, and like listen to myself do 2 different hours coming out of the stream of my consciousness, that I wouldn't recommend anyone ever doing that like that again. However, we can only make edits henceforth, and I'm already looking forward to my next projects. I'm like right now frameworking everything from like my first solo show that I would like to take to Edinburgh Fringe next year, to my next hour as far as another album is concerned, thinking about like what I would want my first special to look like. Because I know you've said special, but hypothetically, the thing that I put out is just an album. Like there is a video component to it because the label sent someone and filmed me in 4K as well. But when a special is put out, you can see it and watch that whole thing on video. My album, you can only hear it. So like that's the actual designation between what those things are and what separates them. So I actually have not made a special yet, but I am working on my first special right now because I do want a video component involved in it because I'm going to be doing some like sign language and some other things in that. But yeah, that's I definitely, it's already out. There's nothing to do about it. If I want to sit there and just like be where I was 2 years ago, I would be incredibly frustrated every day, but I've done another several hundred sets since then, and all of that material has taken new forms. But I also recognize it as just like a something that I completed and as a marker. And although that I don't have a room that has all my like accolades on it. In fact, I don't have like any pictures up of myself, or I really don't care about any of that stuff. And I but I also am a person that if you like talk to me that I plan to win, awards in the future. So it's not like I don't want to be like doing these things, but I don't know, my motivators aren't these things. These feel like just like things that are inevitable. So I just like that first album as well. I just kind of look at it as like, hey, you did something. For 15 years of my drinking, I was always one of those people, especially with my ADHD, I think beyond my drinking, that would just always start up a million projects. And there are, even right now, looking around my room, I can see like 10 things from painting on the walls to just like projects that are in various states of flux and completion. And that frustrates me a little bit. So I think when I look at the album more than anything, I'm just looking at something that I'm very proud of from just being like, hey, you did that. And it's out there and everyone will receive it however they want. And my feelings on it, I've already changed a million times. So I can't imagine that they won't continue to do that. But overall, it's just nice to have something out there that was like a proof of life and was like, hey, you got to do a really cool thing. There's people that participate in this and, at various time lengths that don't necessarily get to do some of the things that I've already been able to do, in these first seven. And so I think it's yeah, I'm overall happy that it is existence. I think like anything, it'll just be like one of those like, when you look at people now that are at the head of the game, at the office that I'm in, your Bert Kreischers and Toms and all of those, Ali Wong, etc. It's like they've all been doing this for over 20 years. And I think I recognize with them that it's like we're in a different place with the internet where they really like their first albums and the different things they were doing when they were first starting out comedy. It's like not all over the internet. People weren't like watching them grow up online. They're listening to people now that have been doing this for 2 decades at the highest level. And then being like, wow, they're all the same, and we're all just out here like putting shit out. So it's like even the culture of me like not posting many clips, like I haven't, much to my slower growth as far as all of that could be seen online, has been due to the fact that it's just like frankly I'm not letting people watch me kind of like take my plane off the ground in the early stages. It's like I don't need to participate like that. I am participating off of it, but it's like I'm not gonna, I don't know, good on everybody. I'm really working on my ego and judgment. So it's like if you want to put up your 5-minute mic set where there's no laughs in the background, then you can do that. But I'm just telling you, you don't have to do that. In fact, you can do it. Don't do it, in fact, and just wait until you actually have something good and then put it up. And if you don't do comedy. Or, that's something you need to think about. Like, if there aren't laughs coming, that is what it is. And I'm not saying I make everyone laugh all the time. In fact, I don't. I make a lot of jokes off stage to my friends that I feel like I've only ever been doing this for 4 to 6, like literally autistic people at a time, who have a heart of darkness and really just a double middle fingers attitude. But at the same time, you can build that also. In 7 years, I could take 4 to 6 people at a time and now sell out some small shows and have a base of support that, like we were saying, isn't anything insane, but also seems to have bottomless growth potential in front of me. And I didn't change tax brackets and nothing like got fancy by any means. I'm going to take a Greyhound next week. I haven't had a car for 3 years. There's like a lot of things that I think when people look at the glamorous internet that they don't recognize about how I'm working on all of this. But I only say these things just for anybody who's listening to realize like it doesn't have to look like anything. And in fact, what it does end up looking like is such a small part, of what you do, that it's just like more important that the what you do feels good for you, because you're the one that's going to have to come and take those buses into very like not any glittery gigs in Des Moines, Iowa, in a basement where people above you are playing duck pin bowling, and Ron DeSantis gave his last speech, on January 6th. That was my first headlining weekend of this calendar year. So if you're like, oh, yeah, everything looks great, and I had a Netflix audition. Yeah, cool, I did, and I didn't get it. That's also the reality of kind of where I'm at the office right now, is just like that new bigger no that's happening. I had my first JFL audition, didn't get it, and then they bankrupted. And then I had my first they asked me to submit for South by Southwest, and then I didn't get it. And then this year I had my first Netflix audition, and I didn't get it. So the point is, also, I want to say this right now, that I think a lot of people don't talk enough about the the not getting it part of just happenings right alongside the getting it part of happenings. So like that's another thing where interested in stand-up comedy, not only do you need to have like this relentless kind of stupidity and ability to just like bounce back after getting like knocked down consistently at all times, but you really need to think about some of these other parts. Like, can you take no for an answer? Because even when you're good at it, even when it's like, I realized with all those festivals, I think eventually I could get into all of them, and that I will. But for then, it was no. So, being able to constantly just be like, oh, okay, 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 okay. But I don't always see no's as no's. I just look at them as not yet's, or I'll look at them in ways it's like, hey, it is no. And then eventually I find out later, maybe something with that festival, or working with that person that I had such a crush on, or hopefully wanting to be on that TV show. Well, then you find out that a bunch of shit involving that shit is shit, and then you realize why you didn't get stuff, or some things like that. So just like having that ability to really be able to compartmentalize is important in all of this, and recognize that it isn't personal. It's going to feel extremely personal because they're just saying no to you with your name in an email to something that you want, but it's not. There's like a million people who identify as a stand-up comic, and there's like less than 100 spots and at all these festivals, and then most of those are already filled out by people with management teams, and then there'll be a little fucking fraction of whatever's remaining for a bunch of really hungry people to get things. But overall, if you stay the course, you can get yours. And there's just like, there's so many ways to do and be and participate in all of this, that I would just say that in every way that this feels overwhelming and not manageable. I can tell you, from a small town kid in Indiana and a college dropout who didn't have money and still doesn't have money, yeah, it's still just as navigate, like you can navigate it though, as with as much ease as anybody else, with the access points that you think that you need. So don't let that be a factor or a hindrance to keep you from participating. And like I said, I think the biggest thing is that you just find that courage within yourself. It's like people all the time with me in comedy, they're like, oh, that's very brave. And I'm like, no, it's actually not brave. Bravery is just like when you act like something's not scary, which is like what the military is and all the other stuff, where they're like, oh, they're so brave. And I'm like, you're holding an AK-47. That's not brave. Um, that's a little child you're in front of. But courageousness is different. And all creativity takes courageousness. Courageousness is like seeing everything that's scary around you and going in anyway. So fuck the bravery. Like, find some courage. And the courage really is just, it's in you. It's just saying that, hey, I am whatever it is that you want to be, whatever it is that you are, however it is that you want to participate, and showing up for yourself in whatever way that you can to try to do that thing that is within you. Um, so yeah, find a little bit of that. Find a little bit of that, And it's after that part, especially with comedy, it's like people, I really give no advice with it. I hate giving advice with it. And the only thing I ever say is that you just need your first open mic. Because it's like, like after that, nothing for me changed aside from everything. I went to that first mic, and then I never stopped getting on stage. So like, what happened? I don't know. But I had to do that one part first, which is, that kind of taking it up and going, hey, I'm going to try this. And then sometimes you might try it and be like, oh, I don't ever want to be on that stage again. And that will really quickly answer your question. as far as whatever that little burning desire in your heart was to participate in this clown town. Or you might get up there and be like, hey, I don't think I maybe necessarily have what it takes to do this professionally, but I really enjoy these fuckaroos at the like over here at this mic, and I like expressing myself like this. And then you can be a hobbyist, and I think those people are also wonderful. I enjoy them. They're not putting like high pressure stakes on everything that's happening. They just come out and participate and want to have a little thing to say and see everybody, and things can take shape from there. So, if that's something you want to do, whatever it is you want to do, you just need to find out whatever that entry point is and go do it.
No, definitely you spoke of courageousness and the idea that going on these Netflix or other auditions and not getting it, but that's courageous in itself to not look at your own material and be like, "Oh, I don't fit the mold. Should I change it?" Because obviously, like you said, the mold changes with whatever trends, and there is courageousness to not go with what's trending just to fit that mold of what would make it you into an audition or into whatever it is that's trending right now.
I remind myself that it's like we don't know what they're looking for. Sometimes I don't even think they know what they're looking for. So like the best thing you can do is come out there with something that frankly they haven't seen. And I don't say that to be like, oh, find, make yourself into some kind of a hacky situation that like is so different. But just, like I don't even remember where I read this recently, but it was talking about like the strongest, most powerful currency that you can have globally as a brand or business is authenticity. So that's what we're talking about. And, that's like you figure out what your authentic signature is looking outside of yourself. It just has to be yours and without much thought as to what it is that you're doing. And so, and I know that's a thing that's like, those are the things that I've been working through for 40 years with everything from like prayer, life experience, therapy, etc. So none of this is like easily done. It's day to day work, at settling yourself and saying, hey, me as me for me will be my strongest position always, but it's the heart of the matters. It's like I don't people like ask me over time where they're like, don't you worry about with you being a good writer that people will like steal your jokes? And I was like, not really, because I've always just shown up as myself. So the only way that someone could actually hypothetically take my material is to perform it as me, and they're not. No one will ever wake up Hannah Roeschlein. So I'm pretty safe and secure with what I have. So it's like if you're worried about your little jokes being stolen or whatever, maybe stop talking about airplane bathrooms. Probably your uncle touched you, talk about that instead, because it's like turns out a bunch of people's uncles touched them, and that's actually true to you and not just you being like, so what's the deal with iced coffee? Like, grow up, no one cares. But at the same time, I told you I can't sit here and think about how everyone else is doing it, or I would never do it my way. So how y'all are squawking, go ahead. Just know certain frequencies will rise above other frequencies, and those frequencies are belonging to the people that, you know, frankly aren't just moving with, the currents and the trends and the all of it. It's your outliers, and it's some of those other things. Like everything that makes you different and weird and unique is the thing.
Yeah.
However want to be with the group, go get with the group. But that's not what stand up is. And that's not, exactly your best creative process. And even most of the groups that I've come into working with nowadays, I am in them because of how relentlessly myself I was. That they were able to see me and be like, hey, bring that over here and augment this thing we have going on. As opposed to me just being like, what can I do to get into the group? Like, no. Most groups that are intact don't have that kind of like wiggle room. So you have to really just kind of be like a freestanding member of society I call it having a synchronized individuality. That's what I told my therapist about life. Whereas, like, when I got sober, that's what I realized that was the best I was going to be able to give everyone, was a synchronized individuality. Like, I'll be here and I'll play nice, but it will be as Han. That's it. Like, no more curbing my enthusiasm on God, no more saying I can't say that, no more whatever. It's just, I will speak first, and we'll talk after, uh, in post. I'm not going to have much pre thought to that. But, like I said, just it's just do you, be you. Like, no one will say it for you. No one will say it like you. It's just you know, it doesn't always have to have all these like great pressures either. Like, we're talking, like, this is my only job now. It's something that I'm recognized for, but at the same time, it's like only one part of a million things that I want to do and how I feel and who I am, and I just like encourage everyone to just like find balance. Like, even like my favorite comedians have a bunch of other stuff they're working on, and it's just like that's good, and make some of that stuff yourself so that you feel good when you're working on this thing that's hard. Because, like we were saying, even with me having just like being a little tiny like joke factory and having a generally easygoing demeanor and not being shy and not being afraid to put myself out there and not get things, still things are very and sticky and owie and ooh, and just whatever. So that's relentless, you know and that's all I will say with that. It's just, it's all out here. It's all in you. Just participate, plug and play, do and
No,
be.
for real. How do you feel about and this isn't currently it's been going on, but like the cancel culture, state of comedy, uh, in the social media playing like a big part in how comedians are looked at? How do you think that is, and how do you think it affects you being like an Asian woman? Do you think it's harder for you or it benefits you? How do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, I find cancel culture to be about as much of like a moot point as anything else, just because it's like, yeah, there are some cancellations that can like affect others. But I mean, if we look at someone like Shane Gillis, he was canceled from SNL and then now hosted SNL. So it's like, as far as what cancel culture can actually do for a person, I find that the visibility that comes off that thing, can actually be of a greater benefit sometimes to a comedian than what wherever they were pre-cancellation, because a lot of humans within our society are also just contrarians. So anytime that someone is like kind of put on a back burner and be like, don't do that, you're like, okay, I'll watch them for sure. I actually didn't know them, but now I like them because they've stuck it to the man, so to speak. So I think thoughtfully about the things that come out of my mouth, believe it or not. But I don't think fearfully about them. I'm never coming up with the intention to wound, but I certainly have a weapon in hand. So it's like, there are, there's just yeah, I've lacked a lot of that fear mechanism that a lot of people kind of proceed with. I mean, I even watch a lot of my friends and people that I look up to comedically, and I'll be in a green room with them, and like I said, I people I look up to, and they were like, they're talking about like a joke they want to do on stage, but it's like rare, like risque to them or new, and they just don't want to try it out during a set, and I'm always like, why? You know what I mean? Like, they're like, why? Like, what do you think is gonna happen? That but this is all fine and dandy. Like I said, I can't do anyone else's like path or career for them. And if you want to move more tepidly, then that's a okay. But I think that if you get canceled or something like that happens, it's like the people that really get canceled also are the ones who have bad behavior. And the cool thing about that now is that it's like, yeah, you can still kind of like get away with it for a second, but because of the internet and the fact that everyone talks and it's a way bigger, more diverse office, like your sins will come before you, and then eventually you'll just not be able to participate at a high level. You'll still maybe have some fans and you can do whatever you want online, but like no one's bending over for Chris D'Elia anymore. Um, so the point is, all of that is potentially inevitable if you're a fucking goon dick. But at the same time, like just saying things, you don't really need to be afraid of that. Everybody's saying things all the time, as long as you just like, as long as there's like a joke behind it and some thoughtfulness, it's amazing what you can get away with. But
Yeah,
if you can also
yeah.
talking and screaming like a Proud Boy or a neo-Nazi, well, it's amazing what you can't get away with.
I definitely feel like there is a balance with uh how if it's like a bad, joke that could cancel you. I feel like as long as it being funny outweighs it, it it's good. There's obviously a balance to it.
For sure. Also, we're telling jokes.
Yeah.
I drop my own personal truth. It's a joke. So you either take it as such or you don't. And for those people that are mostly out here thinking they can cancel a comic, I just encourage you, you goofy Karen ass bitch, to find someone who is doing comedy the way you like, because there's plenty of those people too. And just like, don't participate in the din around the people that make you feel something other, because even then those people have the right to tell the jokes that they are, and not only that, that could be the truth of their experience. So I'm pretty anti-censorship as far as all that's concerned, but the second, as a person who is a female in the office and loves all people, if people are talking out their ass on stage or in some violent tones, I've also been known and seen this where, kind of they can get kind of canceled or barred within our own communities. So that's something too, where it's like, yeah, say whatever you want to say, but just know that like whatever it is that you truly are out there spewing will have its equal and opposite uh, ramifications. And whether that's you losing a fan base that you never really had in the first place, or just losing respect from your peers, both will hurt you.
Hmm. No, and finally, here, I know this has to go with your album. I saw you, or I heard you joke about, maybe having OnlyFans, wink, wink, or you being on a Pacers commercial. Those are the Indiana Pacers, which is amazing. Is comedy your priority, like moving forward now, or are there other avenues in your career you want to make for your next moves in life now at this point?
I definitely am making all kinds of moves. I'm not prone to talking about them when I'm framing them. I tend to like have a great deal of intellectual property and no desire to share it with anyone until it's actually time. But yeah, I have all kinds of things that I'm working on. I'm starting to act. I'm working on writing my first pilot scripts, my first several hours or next hours of comedy, couple podcasts in the works, etc. But as far as like any of the hard specifics of that, no, you'll just have to watch. And as I feel like telling anyone, I will. I don't even like communicate the things I'm doing creatively to my actual homies. Like you have to be involved with the project for me to talk to you about it. So per always, just check it out. But comedy is my number one priority at this point. But all things are due to shifting, depending on how the tides come in. So we'll just see how my mood is and how I'm sailing as far as future future waters. But I intend to get my hands in about as many things as I can.
No, awesome, great to hear. And I know you mentioned earlier about your album that it was filmed, or there is a film. Is that like lost media, or will
Not
that?
necessarily. It's something like I'm not 100% sure with my label, like what I could put out of that. From all of that, like we were making clips with it and doing other things, but that could be something potentially that I could like put up behind a paywall in the future, or just like little parts of that. I'm working on my website right now and getting some things up there, which will have all kinds of Patreon subscription tiers and ways to support me further. I have merch incoming. Uh, I don't know, just all of the things. I'm just like, as you can tell, not in a hurry and don't really care. So as I do, I will, but you can support me in all manners of ways, on and offline. And yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Hannah Roeschlein. I think I have all your information there. They can find you on Instagram and Twitter at Hannah Pump Hander Pump Rules,
Yep.
I believe.
Hander rules.
And your link tree there, Hannah Roeschlein. I'll have that all in the descriptions. Yeah, no, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it, and I hope nothing but continued success for you.
I appreciate you, Mucha. Thanks for your diligence in getting me on here and for this thoughtful conversation.
No, thank you. And yeah, we'll see y'all later. Take care, guys. Bye.
Adios.